commence. It is about 7:01.
I'm going to ask you to take minutes because I am out for the next week.
Okay, can somebody else take minutes?
Okay, Rich, when you have them written up, just email them to me.
Yep.
Then we'll have a record of them, and I will also be
Terrific.
taking notes, and we can.
Great. We have, the first item on our agenda is a continuation of the site plan review for UVASS, parentheses, home on the Connecticut. I presume the applicant may be on.
Yes.
There he
Yes.
is. Sorry, I can't see the screen, so I didn't know you were there. Sorry. So I guess I would ask what progress we have at this point and any new information on the application.
The only thing I know is that the fire chief, the state fire marshal's office, and some contractors are supposed to meet at the property next Tuesday and to go over everything. I don't know anything beyond that. And Lauren, I don't know if you have more information about that?
Yeah, it's a completely separate issue. This committee here is doing a site plan review, and they're deciding if the use of this site is appropriate. So,
Hold it. Did you say where you are in the process? You know, where we left off last time?
all right, so
I was
I
here, so you
emailed-
don't need to recap. I know, but did you have any luck contacting the state and working out with them the standards they think you should be meeting before standards you should be meeting?
they said the report provided to the fire chief was for his use reflects the violations observed at the time of the inspection. Even if there was not a change of use, as you previously indicated, the building is still required to comply with the most recent requirements of the code. Please continue to work with the town to resolve the issues and bring the existing building into compliance. So I responded, we will do what you asked us to do.
So, and have you done the things that needed to be completed immediately? 8, 19, 31, 33, 35?
Yes,
And I guess we're not up to 30 days, but how are you with items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 15?
those things require a lot of contractor work, and there's a contractor meeting to coordinate what needs to be done. Because when the fire marshal gives you a report, it said, it's not clear what exactly those mean to meet all of those standards. So the fire chief is meeting with the state fire marshal to tell the contractors, this door needs to replace, this wall needs to be added, this needs to be put here, that sort of thing. But these are the sorts of things, we had one of these same issues in Heartland, and it took 1.5 years. So if the requirement is to approve a plan to have something done that could take more than 1 year, I don't know. I look at this is site plan review, and the role of this committee is to say, is the site appropriate? Is what you're proposing appropriate? And the answer is yes or no. If the answer is no, then I move on. If the answer is yes, then it's yes. Like it just is. Part of the fire marshal's plan says put in an exterior sign that says where the units are. I'm not going to put in an exterior sign that says where the units are if I don't even know if there's going to be a unit there.
Well, you've got
So-
units existing, so let's go back to the meeting that's coming up on Tuesday is gonna clarify what you need, you know, for the 30-day suggestions and the 60-day suggestions, is that right?
It's not clarifying, it's telling the contractors what to do.
Okay, that's clarifying for them at least, it's, if, all right, so, and these are things that would need to be done anyway. Sounds like he doesn't,
These,
the state doesn't care what the use is, these things need to be done under existing situation.
well, that's debatable, because the reason that they came to those findings at the time of the inspection was because the town provided false information.
So Lauren, is the state still classifying you as an apartment?
Yes.
Okay.
Have we received any different recommendations from the fire chief?
No, and he said that he wouldn't be willing to make any until well after, or not well, after the meeting on Tuesday to see what's gonna happen.
Well, what I was waiting for was a revised list so that I could feel comfortable approving the request with a list of things that are based on safety. And so I'm inclined to want to continue this to our next meeting so that we will have the benefit of whatever was decided or talked about, or whatever plan is developed, you know, on Tuesday. I mean, I have no more information today than I had 2 weeks ago, or whenever the last time was that we saw this, that's how I feel.
David, what's the role of this committee?
The role of the committee is to review and make sure that the site is appropriate, and that does include safety issues. If there are safety issues and they don't feel that adding an additional unit is safe, then that's in their purview.
Okay, so let me clarify that. This site is safe. The fire marshal says the current situation is safe, and I'm supposed to have a plan in place within these certain periods of time, but it's still safe. So it's safe, people continue to live there, people are living there now, everything is fine. So why we wouldn't approve a plan, which isn't even people living there, it's a plan, when it is perfectly legal for people to be there, I just don't understand why we
Okay.
wouldn't approve a plan, since this is a site plan review committee.
Let me be blunt, and I hate to have to say this publicly, but I feel like these things will not be accomplished unless you're interested in getting site plan approval. And I believe that it's a leverage point in order for you to take care of all of these items. So that's how I feel. How else are these things going to happen otherwise?
When a fire marshal tells you to do something, you do it. I mean, I have to be in compliance, those are the rules, you follow the rules, that has nothing to do with whether the site is appropriate.
The site's not safe.
If he says the site is safe, he doesn't say it's not safe, we have 16 other rooms occupied.
Yeah,
It's
but
perfectly safe for all of them.
he
It
is
isn't
indicating,
actually.
he's actually indicating that you have a number of violations that need to be corrected. So, yes, they have not shut you down, but they have also indicated that you have outstanding items that need to be completed. We also don't have a revised letter from the fire chief, and I think some on our board, or maybe all, would be hesitant to find in contradiction to what the fire chief is recommending, so
I don't think the fire chief understands what this committee what the role of this committee is. I think he's saying, hey, don't put in another, don't have people in there until it's safe, but that's not what this committee is doing. This committee is approving whether the site is appropriate for what's been, that's what's been asked. So I'm saying, your job is say, hey, is it appropriate to put in a wall? Is it appropriate to put in a sink? And is it appropriate to change what's currently an exercise room and a storage room into a couple is there any problem with that in terms of the site layout? And if not, then just say, then it's proved. And I'm gonna do everything that the fire marshal asked because it's required. That's the law. I have to be in compliance. It's a totally separate issue.
Well, clearly, you were supposed to have everything in compliance prior to this investigation as well. And that was
No.
not the case.
Absolutely not, because the code was a 19.
Excuse me. The stuff in your hallways, the stairways, the wires on the pipes, I mean, those are just basic safety things that were not in compliance when you had 16 people living there. So please, and I really am offended by the fact that you would say that we don't know what our job is and that our fire chief doesn't understand what our job is either. I think that that kind of assertion is incorrect on both counts.
So, Lauren, I have a question. I think at the last meeting, you had said that if the state continues to classify you as an apartment, you would have to take out everything that was there, so you would be able to classify not as an apartment, is that right? You were gonna take out everything that was there.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, and they're not even giving me an option for that. They wouldn't respond for a week and a half. I had to ask the fire chief to ask because they wouldn't respond to me. So he asked, then they responded and just said, it is what it is, Lauren, we're not changing our mind. So this was all because of the wrong information was given to them by the town, just because they didn't ask me. It's my own business. Why not ask me what my business is? So, you know, the wires being on pipes, I didn't realize that was against the rules. I put a wire on a pipe to get better internet, and the thing in the hallway, you know, that was my stuff. I moved it out of the way. I'm sorry. I mean, those are little things. They took 15 minutes to correct. The big things are they're changing from the building code from, you know, 30 years later building code of a different use. Those are enormous things. So yeah, there were some things that were, you know, but any fire marshal that does an inspection anywhere, they're gonna find something here or there. I mean, one of the things is the sprinkler heads were dusty. I'm sorry the sprinkler heads were dusty. One of them said the paint on the sprinkler was something, you know, that paint's been there for 30 years. All right, we'll fix those. Is that a big time violation? I don't know. But I guess my point, I think the fire chief is amazing. He's awesome. He's a wonderful person. I think he has his heart in the right place. I don't think what I was saying is that I think he wants to make sure that it's safe before someone is living there. I don't think he was thinking before they even prove the plan that we need to have all of these things completed. And I don't think he realized that having all of these things completed could take a year. So why would we wait a year to approve a plan when the plan has things that are required to be able to do what was in the requirements to be done to be able to have the plan? There's this circular logic, and I think what the fire chief is saying is, hey, let's make sure things are really safe and good before someone's living there. And I agree, that's totally fine. But why stop the approval of the plan?
Okay,
You know,
Lauren,
we are ready.
I'm really happy to, when you have a corrective actions plan for your 30-day items and your 60-day items, I'm happy to say, let's approve this, knowing that the 30-day list and the 60-day list are gonna be taken care of. That gives me some sense that I have done my duty as a planning board member to ensure that this location, which we're adding 2 more bedrooms to, is safe. That makes me feel better. But right now.
And I asked,
I don't know what is going to be required and what your timeline is.
and David was CC'd on this email, I asked the fire marshal if he would consider changing his recommendation to exactly that, and he didn't respond. So I agree, I think that's fine, but making me wait for a year doesn't seem fine, but waiting till there's a plan in place for those things seems totally appropriate.
Well, you don't know how long this is gonna take anyway, so I would like to see a plan and your, how you plan to address these things. And, I don't know, maybe there's something that you won't be able to do in a year, I don't know. But I would like to see your plan, because I feel like I would be doing my job better if I knew that there was a plan for safety. And then it's part of our purview as to whether or not that year work gets done.
So, Lauren, I appreciate your input here. Board members, does any other board member have any comments you want to make? It appears that we kind of have the same options now as we did at our last meeting. It appears that there's been some discussions, but we don't have a real sense as to what the actions are that are gonna be taken. We have a recommendation from the fire chief requesting that current recommendations from the fire marshal's office be completed. And we also have the information that perhaps after the next meeting, he may be willing to indicate a change in direction. So, I guess I would, I guess I would entertain a motion to, well, no, I guess I would ask board members for comment here, and then see where you think we're heading here. I think, Vicki, we know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I
Tim?
think we have to move it until we get more information.
Continue it.
Continue it,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Nat, do you have a sense
Yeah.
as to where you would wanna see this to move?
Yeah, I think continue.
Uh-huh. So, Lauren, I guess the question is, do you want to continue this, or do you want to, I guess the other thing would be to have a ruling on it?
I just wanna have the unit, I wanna follow the rules, I wanna get the unit approved, so I'm willing to do whatever it takes to have that happen. That's my goal.
Do we need to put a finer point on what we wanna see next time? Just so it's easier for everybody. We wanna see, as Vicki said, a plan for correction of, I guess, the things that were supposed to be done within 60 days. And
30 and 60 days.
30 and 60 days. No plan for what might take longer, not necessary.
No, I think having a plan for the 30-day items, 60 items, and then anything beyond, what the plan for those.
Well, I think.
Well, I need to clarify, hold on, what those 30 and 60 day, you're not supposed to complete things within 30 and 60 days. You're supposed to have a plan for how you would complete those within 30, 60 days.
Right.
Right.
But I think Lauren said that if he's classified as an apartment, then he wouldn't be able to meet the requirements.
Well, that's something
For the-
different than
Well,
you come back and tell us that.
I think he's actually changed his mind on that.
Maybe.
That's what,
Yeah.
My,
Because on that last one.
the fire marshal said this is an apartment building, whether I think it's an apartment building or not. He says it's an apartment building, I'll meet the code requirements for it being an apartment building.
That's great. That makes me feel better. I'm happy that all those people are gonna be safe, so that's great. So let's hope that the meeting goes well and it's efficient and, on Tuesday, and we can get, a more specific list and timeline for our next meeting.
David, I'm curious, what assurances do we have that these requirements get completed? I mean, do you withhold, do you issue a certificate of occupancy, or do you withhold the permit until?
That would be up to the board. The certificate of occupancy would be given by the fire department. And then I can, at the direction of the board, withhold the actual zoning permit until things are completed.
Mhm.
Why, I mean, I don't see why it would be a bad idea to include in our conditions, some inspections. Have our fire chief go in, you know, in 3 months and in 6 months, just to see that there's progress.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, you know, so that we
is
at
that
least
legal
know.
for us?
Or
We
should
can
the
ask
fire
that.
marshal-
Can we
Yeah.
obligate the fire chief to do something like that?
We might wanna ask him.
Well,
First.
talk to him, but you're not making a decision tonight at all.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, you know, that would be helpful, I think, in terms
Yeah.
of knowing that there's compliance. Because I'm not gonna be able to go in and see if
And the
the
state-
panel is done in the correct way. I mean, we need to have
Right.
somebody who knows.
I assume the state fire marshal
Don't
inspects
assume
it.
anything.
No, but I mean, they must, and then we could ask, yeah, anyway.
No, I mean, obviously,
I
this is
mean,
the
they
first
may
time
never follow up. I
they've
mean,
never
it's,
been there before.
yeah.
I mean, in how many ever years, so,
But they might, if they require stuff, they must make sure
well,
it's done.
how
I
often
wouldn't-
does Loch Plum Lodge get an inspection?
I mean, our insurance people come through all the time.
Okay, no, but like state fire marshal.
I don't believe the state fire marshal.
Oh,
has ever-
goodness, that's all a can of worms. but-
Yeah, I don't think we need to.
No, I know, but I was just wondering, so there is no routine or regular inspection that occurs, and, you know,
Yeah, but that doesn't make sense. I mean, if the fire marshal, state marshal says, you have to do this, do they just walk away and forget it and never come back? I mean,
Sure.
how do they know it's ever done?
I mean,
That's
and the
ridiculous.
state has been doing, you know, its own
State of New
Doge,
Hampshire.
you know.
yeah.
They have their own Doge team, so, you know,
Well, it
if
sounds like.
Lauren waits long enough, there may not even be a state fire marshal.
It sounds like
Don't
the
know.
state fire marshal's inspection was triggered by our fire chief anyway.
Right. yeah.
So that means that our
Yeah.
fire chief, in a sense, has the obligation of doing, you know, inspections and guaranteeing that it gets done. Because otherwise, he's gotta ask the guy to come back again,
Yeah,
which I think is frankly a can of worms, so.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what's gonna happen on Tuesday? The contractors are gonna meet, and they're gonna find out what's gonna do, and then they're going to they're gonna give me a approximate timeline of completing those things. So the only thing that's gonna be new that you will receive is a timeline from the contractors for completing the work, because the list is there, so you have the list. So the only new information you'll have after the meeting is from the contractor saying, I'm gonna do number 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 14, you know, and this is what we think the timeline's gonna be. But I can also say, getting a timeline from an electrician and then actually what they do are completely different things, because they think one thing and it takes 3 or 4 or 5 times longer. So we're gonna get these plans, and I trust I have really good contractors with doing a lot of work in Lyme, and they're great people, but, you know, whether they meet those timelines is not something that I can control. So I just wanna make sure that you're aware, after Tuesday, I'm gonna have these timelines, and they're gonna do what's in the list. but it's not something that I can control whether they actually meet those timelines.
But I think all we were asking for was a plan, not the execution of all the
No,
elements.
we expect execution.
But not necessarily in a specific time frame.
And I would also add that in addition to timeline, you're gonna be privy to what this is gonna cost. And that may, I don't know, what your reaction is gonna be to that, and what modifications to the list you might make as a result of the cost thing. So, we're gonna all know a little bit more. I'm not that concerned with the cost, that's your issue, but because of cost, you may be adjusting timeline, because I don't know, what your cash flow is like, blah, 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 but, so I think that they may give you a timeline, but you're gonna have to put it into a realistic execution, plan, based on what you can afford and what you think is possible for them to perform for you, based on their availability and that type of thing.
So,
That'll be part of the plan.
That'll be part of the
That he
plan that
brings
Lauren gives
to
us.
us,
I
yes.
don't really want to see, a electrician's idea about how, it may be that you need to have electrical that then needs to be covered up by sheetrockers in order for it to be compliant. So we need to have you telling us when you think, if it's a two-step thing, when that whole thing is gonna be done.
so Vicky, I think.
So what you're asking is for a date of completion for each item number in the report.
It would be helpful for me, and then I would know, this really can't be done for a year. Okay, fine, then we know that, that won't be done for a year, and, I probably would want some feedback from our fire chief to say, is that reasonably safe to have to wait for a year for that, and, just some of these things, I don't know how sensitive they are. But, I'm just trying to bring this into real life. And, you bring up a point, you can't control your contractor, so you need to tell us your best guess. It's not gonna be when the guy thinks cause that could be tomorrow, I'll get it done tomorrow. And, you need to use your expertise to make the timeline realistic.
So I think what we're saying is that we need something more than just a bunch of letters from your subcontractors. We're actually needing something from you addressing the list that the fire marshal has provided, with your action plan and of how those items are gonna get completed and when those items are going to get completed. Am I restating that?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And I would also love to have our fire chief look at Lauren's plan, just so that we're
Before-
all on the same page.
Right, but I think we need the fire chief's
Yeah.
input
Yeah.
before we can act on
Yep.
I'll be
So-
talking to the fire chief, I'm out next week, but, I'll be talking to him, the week of the 7th.
Okay. Well, having something in writing from the fire chief is, I think, incredibly helpful, just so that we have a solid record and Lauren knows what is said and we all, see what Aaron thinks.
So I'm looking at our next meeting is on the 10th.
Yep.
And,
And the one after that's the 26th, though.
and David, you're out basically the week of
July 4th week, so it's next
July
week.
4th week,
Yeah.
next week. So.
It's probable that it's really
What's
gonna be the 26th before we get everything.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be back in the same boat if we don't have all the pieces put back together.
Right.
And so,
Does the 26th give you enough time to get something together by, the week before? So you're gonna meet next week, and then, to get it to the fire chief, you get his comments, you might have to make some changes, and then get it to David. Do you think you can,
Our meeting would be
Do
the 24th, our second meeting in July would be on
oh,
the 24th.
sorry, I'm looking at June. Yeah. Is it 24th?
I can do that 2 days after the contractors are here.
Okay,
And then, but the fire chief needs time to be able to look at what you've got as well, so that we can have his input for our meeting.
So he'll have it on the 3rd.
of July,
Yeah.
Perfect.
okay? So,
So do we continue it till the 10th with the option to continue it to the following week if there's not a response
so
from
we're
the
gonna
fire
get
chief?
it, like, getting stuff like Thursday during the day is.
Right, well, that's,
Right, good enough, right.
So we need to have it a little before so we can read it.
as long as I have it by Tuesday, when I send everything out for the,
But when you say have it, what you're talking about it is,
Response from the fire.
the
the list has
plan
come to
and-
you and the fire chief, and the fire chief has had a chance to respond to
Right.
the list.
Yes.
And we would need that by Tuesday the 8th.
Yes.
Is what you're saying. So that does put the fire chief, well, it puts both Lauren and the fire chief on a very tight schedule.
Yeah.
Well, if it doesn't happen, I mean, I'm happy if July 10th, we don't have the information, just to continue it to the next meeting in
24th.
July, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's totally fine, we're not gonna, like, move to, close the case or anything like that.
So, I guess
So I'll make a motion to continue the hearing until, and the consideration of this case until July 10th.
okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Do we need approval, or do we need an actual request from the applicant to continue it?
No, as long as he agrees to continue it.
So, are you agreeing to that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion to continue the hearing till July 10th. We have 4 regular board members, so I think that's all we need to vote on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, there's none. So this hearing has been continued to July 10th. Thank you for your responsiveness, Lauren, and good luck. I hope that all the pieces can fall together for you.
All right, thank you, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. Okay,
Rich, I just wanted to say something.
okay.
I really feel that we have a bigger problem here than just fire code violations. There's no way that he is a bed and breakfast. I mean, a little history that was built, I don't know, 30-some years ago for John and his wife, and it was called Breakfast on the Connecticut, and he ran it as a bed and breakfast for years and years. And then he sold it, Lauren bought it, and changed the name to Home on the Connecticut, which is accurate. It's not a bed and breakfast anymore, it's a home. So, I mean, the definition, yeah, so anyway, I don't see how anybody can really argue that it's a bed and breakfast.
Okay,
It
well,
obviously isn't, so.
He's arguing
So
that.
we're, right, but we're in violation of the zoning.
No,
Now,
the zoning board has said it's fine the way it is, and we do
well,
not make
but
that.
we're opening ourselves to a lawsuit,
Well,
because it's obvious that it's
Well,
not
it's
not
conforming
us.
to the zoning.
Who would bring the lawsuit?
It's the zoning board.
Well, the issue is that people are not becoming residents, as far as I know. They're just using it for a medium-term rental, meaning that they are there for, more than overnight, but they're not living there as a resident. And the zoning does not differentiate the terms until the zoning differentiates how long you're staying. then then he is in compliance with the zoning. There is no
Well,
violation.
So you're saying under lodging,
Under lodging,
Lodging
but lodging
accommodations is
says
dated.
transient. In transient, the definition is passing through or by a place with only a brief stay or sojourn. Transient applies to what, in short duration and passes quickly. So,
again,
Tim, I
It's
totally
not-
agree with you. I said last hearing that I thought that the town had given him a lot of latitude. The zoning board has already said what he's doing is fine. What we need to do is clarify that and
but I still
by
think
zoning change.
we're really open to a lawsuit. I mean, it's just,
Well, that's the
because we're
zoning
not
board.
following we're
The
not following the
zoning
zoning.
board is the board that said it was okay. Now,
Well,
if
they
we
could
want,
get sued, I mean.
they can get sued right today, yesterday, and whenever they made that decision. Do I agree with that? No, I don't, but that's what they decided, and that's how, it's not
So
up
what
to
did they
us.
decide exactly? They said it was.
They said it was
well, they,
It
unclear.
was unclear.
yeah, that the transient, does not, short-term, it's just unclear language.
We don't have a definition of transitory,
Yeah.
which would define, like, what's the difference between staying for a weekend and staying for 6 months?
And so I think the zoning needs to make those
Yeah.
differentiations.
Does the state have that definition?
I don't know.
It's interesting, I Googled a transient definition in zoning New Hampshire. And this is AI overview, but it says in New Hampshire zoning, transient refers to the temporary occupancy of a dwelling unit or property, typically for a short duration as opposed to permanent residency. So
It's a lot of leeway there.
there's a lot of leeway there, but then it goes on, this concept is particularly relevant in the context of short-term rentals, often booked through platforms like Airbnb or VRBO. Many New Hampshire municipalities define transient occupancy as a stay of less than 30 consecutive days. Some ordinances might even define it specifically within their short-term rental regulations as lodging provided for compensation for stays of between 1 and 14 consecutive nights. So he's, he's certainly probably on the outer limits of what a transient
If he lived
definition.
in one of those municipalities that had defined it,
Yeah,
but he doesn't.
he doesn't, so, I think
But you
the
can't
next.
say that a nurse that's living there for 6 months or maybe a year and getting her mail there, getting her mail here. I mean, maybe she doesn't vote here, but she's getting her mail here. They do vote? Okay, so to me, that is a resident. I don't care what you guys say.
Okay, I totally agree with you, but that's not for us to do the
Yeah.
definitions of, or, to interpret the zoning ordinance like that. That's for the zoning board, and they've been presented with that issue. We have to accept it, and if we were really bent out about it, we should have amended it for this past town meeting. So I think that the
We
whole
can
thing with lodging accommodation for town meeting 2026, that needs to be, I've got it on my list right here, and, for something that needs to be added to the list that David sent out, and by the way, he's been grandfathered, because he's been using it like he's been using it,
Illegally.
before we make the ordinance change, so.
Right, but it still doesn't meet the zoning definition, I
But
don't
it's,
think.
I think at this point, it's
We
out
can't-
of our,
We can't, we can say it, but he's.
It's out of our
he's-
wheelhouse,
he's-
really.
We know that what he has is not a bed and breakfast in the, kind of normal sense.
Right.
And we know what he's doing, and he's been doing it without being shut down, and therefore, he's gonna be grandfathered.
we have a general
Yeah,
public
I do have
person here.
I'm late to the party and it sounds like a lot of fun. But, so you have new information. It sounds like that the state fire marshal's defined it as apartments, which is,
Well, it's hotel or apartments it's a dual designation. So it's not just.
so it's not strictly apartment?
Right,
Okay,
so
okay, well,
Yeah.
that's
For
interesting.
long-term stay, hotel.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't sound transient.
No, and when you saw the stuff in the hallways, that's people's stuff. You
I
know,
mean,
it was
don't-
not, it was like their personal files and, you know.
So what are the practical implications of, you know, let's just, whatever you wanna call it, a hotel or apartment complex in the rural district, then, you know, that's a precedent, then pretty much anybody can do that.
Well, rural, lodging and accommodations is allowed in the rural district.
Right, and so anywhere in the rural district, you can have people who are staying 6 months to a year and voting and be
Yeah.
considered transient?
A motel.
I mean, no, I mean, it's hard to
Well,
swear.
without the, you know, there's nothing in the zoning that tells me how long they can stay and not be transient.
Well, I mean, Tim read it, it sounded, you know, I mean,
Well,
it-
again,
I-
it's,
it's
it-
really,
it's-
really stretching it.
It's a loophole, and the town has given him quite a bit of latitude. And I just wanna leave it there, and I think it's a, you know, so what do we have? We have Loch Lyme Lodge, we have the Lyme Inn, or lodging accommodations that could get turned into multi-unit dwellings, if we don't change the zoning, right?
So what about a motel? How does that?
Well, let's just talk about what we have and like
No,
what's
but
the
I mean, I'm
worst
saying the
case.
precedent that's being set, could somebody build a motel?
yeah, I could put a Motel 6 across the street from you without a
In the
problem.
rural
In
district?
the rural district, yep.
As long as it was
And
The
that,
dimensional
within a
controls.
certain, yeah,
Right.
follow dimensional
Yeah.
controls.
and that's not, I don't think what we want. So we've
No,
set this
that's-
precedent that it's not, so we need to change the
Well, we
zoning,
need to
yeah.
change the zoning.
Yeah, lodging and accommodations has been in the rural district since the inception of zoning, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Be prepared for a
But we
fight
need to change,
What kind of fight?
yeah.
if you take that out of the rural residential.
Well, you know, I don't
I'm
wanna
just kidding,
make
but,
existing uses non-conforming. What I wanna do is put some limits on.
on future
on-
development.
Yeah.
No, or limit, well, even on what we have now, but, so to make sure that we're not running into this kind of gray area without,
Right,
you know, either a pathway to turn those into, you know, more year-round accommodations, you know, that would be possibly okay, or, that it wouldn't happen at all, so.
yeah.
Right,
So
we
what
do-
are the consequences of us just changing the zoning, writing in a limit, a 30-day
Yeah.
limit? It's just that he has to, what, tell people they have to leave, they leave for
No,
one
no,
day,
no,
come
He's
back?
He's
grandfathered.
grandfathered, he's been
So
doing it.
he's grandfathered in, so we
Yes.
would never have to change his business plan at all.
We would not be changing his business plan.
But we would be protecting
We would-
ourselves from,
what
or
we
at
would
least
be
Tim,
doing is-
from having the Motel 6 across from his
Right.
house.
We would be
Right.
Which
prevented
would be the
from,
drag.
from
Like
It
over
him.
could,
there.
it couldn't be done anyway, but.
No, he has a non-conforming use. What we couldn't do is approve another unit, another bedroom, because that would be expanding the nonconformity, unless he went to the zoning board and got a variance.
So you can expand up to 50% under a special exception under section 8.
Because he couldn't get a
Okay, well,
variance.
there he goes, he's gotta go to the zoning board for that,
Yep.
so,
Well,
okay, so.
so we could do this either after he finishes, or we could do it, and so he's grandfathered in
No.
for whatever he expands, or he could go through the special exception.
Well, yeah, it has to be voted on at next town meeting, so.
And he's-
And he's
Yeah,
doing it.
Yeah, but I think the town would probably realize that it's a loophole and it needs to be closed.
Right, but I mean, it's not legal until it's voted on.
I understand.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, bed and breakfast is pretty milquetoast. I mean, if you limit the number of guests you can have and, you know, and you define transitory, I mean, being able to have, I mean, it's kind of like a short-term rental or something like that. Having guests come and stay at your house, they pay you, you make them breakfast, and, you know, they leave after the weekend's over, or after graduation is over. Something like that, I mean, I think we need to look at what is tolerable next door to you, and, you know, what would be a, you know, negative change in character.
Right, because I think, yeah, my problem is we've set a precedent that we may not want, so we have to take care of it. By doing this, allowing him to do it, because now somebody could come in and say, well, you let him do it, so.
Exactly.
So that's why we
Yeah.
have to really address this, because.
Right.
Exactly, so
Right.
it's on, in my view, it's on the list of zoning
And I
amendments.
think I have it on.
I don't think it's on this version that I got, but,
Before we do that, can we just do one administrative thing of approving the minutes? And then our next topic is possible zoning ordinance changes, and we can carry on with
yep,
with that
yeah,
and
I don't
others.
see it on here.
I thought it was here, but I know Rich and I have talked, I may have added on the newer list. One minute item I wanna bring up is there was an omission in the 522 minutes. And that was.
523.
Was it 523?
No, it's 522, the May 22nd meeting,
Oh.
yeah.
Well, you've got it down as 523 here in the last minutes.
No, it was on the 22nd. Anyway, the omission was that I did not record that Tim had seconded the motion for approval for the Lockline Lodge condo subdivision and the unanimous vote of the board.
Okay,
And so I'd like to add to those minutes, just the two lines. Tim Cook seconded the motion, Richard Mengy called for a vote, and the motion passed unanimously. I'd like to amend those minutes too.
okay, do you need a motion on that?
Yes.
Yes, we're gonna have to reapprove them, right?
Yep.
Okay, Nat has just made a motion to revise those minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 I'm
Thank you.
abstaining because I wasn't at that
And
meeting.
Vicky's abstaining, okay.
Oh, thank you, that way,
Great. Well,
Does
Nat
that
has
have to now
pointed out that our
recursively
last,
show up in these minutes? Does that,
Uh,
does
th-
that
it was-
recursively now have to show up in these minutes?
yes, in these minutes,
Well, I guess
yes, for
so, yes,
tonight,
right, of course.
then there should be a notation that those minutes were amended.
Or further amended.
so it looks like we have one correction on item 2, acceptance of the minutes from May 8th, and that should be May 22nd.
So it looks like the third paragraph of item 1 is redundant. Actually, it's pre-redundant, because it's the same as the first sentence of the next paragraph. So you could probably take that out.
Wait, say that again.
Yeah, I can see.
Lauren
The
noted-
third paragraph of item 1,
Yeah,
Lauren Wademeyer asked the board to vote, and then the next paragraph begins, Lauren noted that he would like the board to approve the application condition. It's the same thing. And then back down there, in that next same paragraph, should be a period after the additional unit. And then he believes that if the board X out 2
Yeah.
delays their approval, the corrections are made. And then you gotta fix the 23 to 22
Yep.
in both places.
Good. And I had one question more, I guess, on the item 3, the board discussed questions for a survey about the residents' vision. I wasn't sure.
well, that's a
Of the
resident,
housing.
about the town
Resident-
residents'
yeah, sorry.
visions.
Residents with a TS.
Okay, that's what it was, yeah, all right. I just-
Sorry, I used the wrong.
Yep.
Obviously,
It's
Are
amazing
we,
we communicated all.
yeah. Are we good with the minutes? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as
Amended?
amended?
Yep. I'll make the motion.
We have a motion from Vicky and a second from Nat. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, so now we can get back into the issue of possible zoning ordinance changes. So we have a few, we have David's list that has been revised. And David, as I look through this, I'm thinking that this is the same, except that you have started adding additional items at the end.
Yes,
Starting with, under accessory units, or accessory uses, E, and I don't think that paragraph E is the right reference, but the gross floor area of the accessory unit does not exceed 750 square feet. And then that plays into
I can
the,
pass around copies of the,
Yeah, can you give one to John too?
now he can just,
No, because John, what we're all gonna do is look at these and choose our favorite one and be the person responsible for drafting. And I think the first one actually has your name on it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think the ag soil one,
We've
I bet.
already done that.
I believe it's the ag soil
I
one
know,
that
but
has
he's
John's
the
name
only
on
one
it.
who knows how to fix it.
Well,
there are more.
sorry, Rich. I did it last week.
Uh,
Thank you.
So I think I'd like to remind the board that these things take a lot of time, and we have until January-ish to have a hearing on this?
Yes,
We wanna have
Have one in
wording.
December.
Well in
We've said
advance.
Halloween in the
Yeah.
past.
No, that's.
That's a really
yeah,
good date
yeah.
to aim at.
Yeah, so I concur with that.
and like I say, this is just a list of things I find irritating,
Right,
and the boards, you choose what you want, and
right, and I think we need to add the one about the lot size averaging that you left us with last one, which is 511 G7.
Yeah,
Up on page 39 of the zoning ordinance, and then we, definition of transitory guest, and actually a full
Yeah,
review of
that's-
lodging accommodations, because, there are lodging accommodations and lodging accommodations, and we may wanna, be more specific about rules about one versus the other, like, so, and I'm just, nuts.
Yeah, I think-
Somebody can pick that as their favorite and work on that if they want.
But, I mean, realistically, how many of these are gonna actually get done and ready for town
Say
meeting?
4 or 5?
Think that many?
If everybody chooses one and we work on it, and, so there's one person always working on it, and, that every time we have one of these meetings, we try to get everybody's, we can move more along. I mean, some of these just don't need a whole lot. Like if your favorite one is the shoreline conservation district, but,
Unfortunately, we can't have Rich work on that.
no,
but-
no, but maybe that isn't anybody's favorite, so it doesn't get picked, so.
We can't, I don't think we can in good faith
Yeah,
do
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. And maybe,
Well, do we know,
which one would you like to work on?
well, I've already talked about the ag soil.
So is that the one you would like to work on? Because, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
really complex situation. If you've already done it, then what we need to do is spend some time, vetting your
Yeah.
suggestion.
I mean, I think.
But let's
yes.
not get involved in
Yeah.
details. If we can, define what the problem is, how many, we've all looked at these and,
Yeah, we wanna make sure we know what David's problems are. I mean,
well,
what
okay,
his-
but,
what his
but
problems.
if, like, oh, I don't really wanna think of, if there's nobody who wants to think about conversions, then we won't need to think about conversions. Is there somebody who wants to think about conversions?
I mean, I'm actually interested in conversions.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so we've got 2.
Yeah, I think we really have to do the one about with, home ag.
Okay,
I
so
mean, that had, I think.
the
we-
lodging accommodation is a must,
Yeah.
as is Rich's, the Brown
The sh-
Amendment,
The shoreline protection.
yeah.
Well, I could do,
So that's 4.
I can do lodging and accommodation. I think
Okay,
at least I understand what we think is wrong with that one.
right, right. And
Yeah.
I don't understand.
And you can
a lot
go
of
to
these other ones.
Hanover has definitions of transitory guest, and they use that in the context of short-term rentals. So, you know, you can use their wording and just change the numbers if, you know, it suits you, but
And
that's.
so I guess the question is, how far along, how far do we wanna take that? Do we wanna just come up with a definition of transient, or do we want to get into the short-term?
I don't think we wanna get into short-term rentals, because I don't
mean,
think
that seems like a pretty complex.
No, but I think that there's a difference between a hotel, Motel 6, and bed and breakfast.
Yes.
And that, you know, you could define a bed and breakfast as, you know, no more than 4 guests at a time or something like that. I mean, you know, whatever Nat comes up with, which is very different than a motel, which would clearly be a lodging accommodation, and maybe lodging accommodations only go on Route 10, or I don't know what you'll come up with,
But
but.
what would be the maximum number of units?
Well,
You can't
that's
go
up
over
to
6,
Nat,
right?
okay, no, this
Yeah.
is lodging accommodation,
Yeah.
not a
Not a
multi-unit
residence.
dwelling, yeah,
Right.
yep. So, I mean, I think it,
I think it'd be great if Matt wanted
okay,
to
so Nat says that
start
fuel
that.
tank, I really like the plan development myself, but, is that most important? David, what needs to be done with the special exception criteria?
The zoning board would just like people to review it and see if they think that all 14 criteria just seems like a lot of esoteric requirements. So just, I think the board would like to at least have the planning board review it and see if it really makes sense.
I think it's-
I'm sorry,
I
but
think it's fine
I
myself.
think
I don't think it's broken.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's,
okay,
that is
so
perfectly
that-
fine.
that-
I'm
that's
just
my thought as well.
conveying,
Yeah, I mean, do they want more qualitative stuff? I mean, less qualitative stuff and more quantitative stuff? Or, I mean, is there a specific thing? I mean, you know, we could say vehicle approaches so that it's designed not to create interference with traffic. You know, according to the road agent and New Hampshire DOT, do they want more specific like that, or?
I think that would be helpful, but again, if the board doesn't feel that it's, you know, that this basically covers that, then that's,
Yeah,
I think
I don't know
at least
which
having
one
a
I
good
think of.
discussion about each one and seeing if that, the board is still happy with it.
Okay, well, I would say if we have time, let's go over it, or we can on our own time review these, and if anybody has a problem with any particular one, we can bring that up, but I,
You know, and then you have to think, you know, from the zoning board's perspective of, you know, okay, every time they are looking at a special exception, they have to go through these,
as they should, because
that one they
that's,
do.
that's the reason why it's a special exception. So
Yep.
all these things are considered in a public setting with the neighbors, so the neighbors can find out why these things, you know, why
And I
any
think, you know-
project is in conformance with these things.
And David, can I ask a question? My understanding is that a special exception is a matter of right. So when the ordinance grants such as a special exception, that it is presumed to be conforming unless, presumed to be permissible unless it fails one of these things. that,
Or
you know-
whether a lot of the special exceptions have other criteria too.
Sure, of course, right.
But as long as it, yes, as long as it meets the criteria of the special exception,
So if it was a hazardous use.
right.
No,
But
Sorry.
I would look at like some of the longer ones,
Mhm.
go through number 11. And some of it sounds good, but as you start getting, you know, it's,
Yeah, but what? I mean, they can read it, right?
yeah,
I mean, if that needs to be broken into paragraphs, that can be easily done as, you know, without a zoning change.
and then, you know, in manner consistent with the master plan. Is that,
can the zoning board even determine?
right, well, that's a good question, that,
Okay, isn't that the planning board's purview?
well,
Well,
writing the master plan is, you know, looking back and saying, does it, you know,
I
trying
just
to go,
asking
you
that
know,
as a
look
rhetorical
at this,
question.
go back and saying, well, you know, does this, you know, incursion into the agricultural soils conservation district to enlarge your
That's
house
got
by,
nothing to do with 11.
but you have to go through, but it says, you know,
11 is all about
Well,
impact
is
on
the, you know,
community services.
the proposed use and in a manner consistent with the master plan. So it does apply to every thing, so it, you know,
No, well, this is about municipal services, it's not about ag soils. It's, you know, if it was generally about the master plan, we'd have that up in A, that says, you know, it's gotta be consistent with the master plan in every one of these situations. You know, so there, but this is having to do with municipal services.
well, and again, but again, look at that last section. It kind of deviates from,
You mean in 11?
yep,
It's certainly one long-ass sentence.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, well,
So, I mean, that's the type of, you know, just, you know, it includes an awful lot of things, you know, other relevant plans, programs.
It does, but, you know, if, you know, we were gonna get scattered in premature development by approving this special exception, you can, you know, make sure that the applicant is gonna pay for those expansions or, you know, improvement of those services. That's what this is about. So, I mean, I agree that it's cumbersome, but I think the gist is there. Anyway, I don't personally wanna work on that one, but if somebody else does,
So David, do they, just a question, does the CBA, are they comfortable with variance? I mean, sometimes I hear variance thrown out there. I mean, my understanding is it's not very easy to get a variance. You have to show a hardship,
Yeah,
and you have to show that you can't do something that all your neighbors can do.
it's just basically, yes,
So, and they follow that.
yes.
Okay.
They understand that very clearly.
I hope so, because sometimes I just hear,
knows that.
oh, we're gonna get a variant, you know, they're gonna get a variance, and it's like, yes, it's not that easy.
No.
They do understand that, yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I find myself in a conundrum here. At the select board meeting 2 days ago, I asked, so you may know that the select board, in the previous meeting, agreed to put into abeyance any enforcement of the, maybe that was just this last time, but put into abeyance an enforcement on buried propane tanks.
On your buried propane tank.
On my particular
Right.
case.
So you don't have to dig it up, is that what you're saying?
At the moment.
Not, at the moment, no, and so, at the meeting, they also said that that I would, in fact, would be working with the planning board to get,
Forget it,
to get a
Richard.
successful resolution, so I would not be averse to working on that. This is, I will say, this will clearly be in public meetings. I do need, would need to talk with the fire chief, and all, and I would certainly invite David to be present at any of those meetings. And hammer out some language. I think what Michael Hensley said in the public hearing was straightforward, and so I would like to be involved in that.
Yeah, that's a, interesting dilemma. Um,
Well, we'd have to approve whatever,
Yeah.
whatever you
But
get.
we do, but I do think that it could end up coming through slightly tainted, depending on how much involvement you have or how it's perceived that this came
Can I
about.
offer an alternate solution?
Sure.
Would you like me to take the lead on that one?
Absolutely.
And then I will include Rich to,
well, as long as you're not giving up your post at steep slopes, cause I thought you
Yeah,
were
I'm still-
working on that one.
Yeah, I'm still
and that's
working on
really
that, got some
important.
language just started.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
Still,
So you do too, steep slopes and the fuel tank,
yep, I'll do the shoreline fuel tank.
okay.
Now, you added something on the back here,
I have a lot on the back, but,
no, that had to do, you wrote shoreline district.
That's-
Is that different from?
no, that's the same, I forgot that I had it on the front page,
Okay,
so,
so we can cross that out.
Yeah, we can cross that out.
That's covered on the front page.
yep.
Okay. Okay, so,
Yeah, I have a
David, okay.
question. We at one point had talked about table 4.1,
Uh-huh.
because, you know, in trying to be exhaustive, it's really not in the modern times. You know,
Uh-huh.
and I wondered if we wanted to consider revising that table.
To, like, the headings along the left side, or?
Yes,
Okay,
not necessarily in, I mean,
so then what we're doing, well, I mean, certainly if Matt says, oh, we need bed and breakfast as a separate lodging accommodation, then we'd have to add a new line.
right.
But did you have other things?
Well, I mean, there's things that, it says sawmill, but it doesn't say anything about, you know, computer, telecommunications, you know, all of those more modern uses.
What do you mean for computer though? So would it be an office, or would it be a retail?
Well, I think we have a fiber optic head station that's, you know, is that an allowed use?
That was, if we look on my list, I have the telecommunications ordinance, I geared mainly towards cellular, not internet facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's another one I'd like the board to look at, the telecommunications ordinance, and, it really is very much geared, with a lot of, what I think overly technical details on, you know, the definitions and stuff that's not necessarily,
This talks
Can you-
about tower heights and,
or which I think those are very valid.
interesting,
But if you look at,
What-
it should be in the back of everyone's,
So could that be massaged a bit to include Phoebe's concerns?
I think it's the last appendix of
it's the end of this book, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, telecommunications.
Backwards, page 12 first, and then go backwards.
Oh, no, oh,
Yeah.
did I get it backwards in there? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Where are we?
We're at the
Mine
very
is in
end.
sequence. It's at, I think it's the last,
It may have been that when I put the books together,
I got a special edition,
At the
so,
very-
but it's fine, I can.
You may have an older
Where he,
version of the
so
book
yours
that
is
has,
like this?
look, it could be,
1, 3,
it might be the next to last one. I think the last one is wind energy, sorry.
Mine is-
yeah, this is it.
like
It's a
the
12-page,
stamp with the upside
document.
down
This is all
airplane.
the telecommunications.
Oh, okay,
ordinance.
oh, okay,
Right there.
I didn't go back far enough, I
Yeah.
got you.
I think a lot of it is very good, but, you know, radio frequency engineer.
Well, I guess back then, I mean, this is
Yeah.
obviously a boilerplate thing that got modified for our use, but
Yep.
I wonder if, rather than gutting it right now, could Hebe just insert like cellular things?
Well, it's,
that would-
the classifications, the telecommunications facility classification, an internet hub building.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, what about the consolidated building? I mean,
Consolidated telephone.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I don't see that as,
that's not telecommunications?
it is, but, You could
Is
talk
there
about-
something that you're
It's not
thinking
wireless though.
is either in violation or is,
No, it
would be
just
coming
seems
down the
like,
pike?
just seemed like, I just being silly, I don't think it says cobbler, but, you know, some of those specifying
Yeah,
cobbler and not some of the more modern office applications.
Well, that's a service use, the cobbler, so the generalization I think is good because you can throw things, you know, like, you know,
Reduce the specificity into. Yes.
tattoo parlor, I mean, you need to actually, you know,
No.
have all those things, pet store, I mean, you know.
Is
pet
that an
store.
art studio, or is it
What
a
would that
clinic,
be
or is
under?
it?
yeah.
Well, that's a good question,
Because if it's not there, then you can't do it, right?
right, but you want them to fall into broader categories. Rather
One of
than-
the planning workshops I went to, they said, yes, you can have a tattoo parlor, but you can't have, I don't know, a tattoo parlor that sells candy bars, because
That's retail. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just totally different, oh, no, you can't allow it, and.
The only tattoo artist in Lyme was a home occupation, so.
Right.
Mhm.
There you go.
Down,
Yeah.
wasn't it down on North Thetford Road?
Yeah,
Yeah, Tom Ball.
Tom Ball had it.
He did all my artwork.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly, excavation contract, I guess it's excavation, is that an excavation
That's-
contractor?
no, that's
No,
a gravel pit.
that's a gravel pit.
Oh, oh, really?
Yes. That's one of our things, is gravel pits, we're supposed to be reviewing gravel pits.
Are we really?
Yeah, it's one of the planning board's duties.
Oh,
So,
it is our responsibility.
Yeah, one of
If
those
somebody-
things.
If somebody wants to make,
A new gravel
A new
pit.
gravel pit,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we're supposed to be monitoring gravel pits,
Mm.
right?
But it's not subject, I mean, it's, though yes means permitted by right, so you can have a gravel
Right.
pit, anybody,
But
anywhere
we're
in town.
supposed to be monitoring them. I mean, if you look at the planning board duties, it's just like we give driveway permits, there's some accessory stuff.
So it's not site plan review, it's just monitoring.
Well, in my view, that's quite a change, and I would say, yes, excavation or, you know, a gravel pit would be a
That's
site
true.
plan review.
Yeah, yeah, I would say
It's
that.
a
I would
big
consider it
change.
a site plan review if someone
Yeah.
came and said, we
Yeah.
wanna open up a gravel
Yeah.
pit because it's a commercial.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
right.
But it's not at the moment, it's by right,
Well,
right?
that's zoning.
Yeah, the zoning allows you, but, I still think I would send it to site plan review under the, is a commercial endeavor.
Right.
Well, doesn't business
No.
imply commercial endeavor?
Yes.
Yes, although, and, doesn't say SPR, so, yeah, that's,
It does say by right, you see.
yeah. So, yeah, that may be a change.
Yeah, but this isn't the only thing, I mean, there's things in here that would come to us that are, I mean, it's basically, we have site plan review instead of a conditional use. The law governing site plan gives us the ability to review anything but a residential development.
Right.
We do everything else. You know, Hebe, I've seen towns that have things called essential services, so that the pump house and the substation and, well, in Hanover, it includes the water reclamation facility and the water treatment facility.
Because that's not.
Because that's
just
not
a-
in the proper setback, so essential services have a lot of, you know, they don't have a whole lot of dimensional things associated with them. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at, for like,
So Hebe, are you saying, you're sort of saying, I guess, that we should allow things that aren't in here that we can't, we don't
Well, I
allow
mean,
now, is that
if
what you mean?
they're in the same spirit,
well, we can't, I mean, cause we can't allow things that aren't in our zoning ordinance, cause that's the way our zoning ordinance is written.
but
So
we're
if-
talking about modifying our zoning ordinance.
Yes,
Yeah.
So I'm talking about
Yeah.
updating this table so that, I
Right.
mean, clinic, what's a clinic?
we have a definition of clinic, so.
Yeah.
A clinic is a place for medical or similar examination or treatment of a person or animals as outpatients. So, I guess my cat staying at Tom's is not a My cat has stayed there overnight for medical reasons.
Well, it was only because you didn't show up to pick him up.
No, but he was transitory,
Right.
he was there.
Yeah,
I was just raising it as a thought, that some of the modern,
yeah, well, no, it's,
I
I
mean,
think it's
they're
hard
not
to,
I think we could end
Love
up
it.
going down a big rat hole on that.
I think
and
it's a good
spending-
rat hole to go down, but it's,
but you say in the spirit, it's hard to define that, you know, we think it's in the spirit, is that what you said, spirit or in the?
well, I mean, you know, clinic is very specific for, but does it, you know, it's like a yoga studio. Where does that fall? Where's a small gym, you know, of those sorts of things, which
Yeah.
are not obnoxious uses and
Yeah.
could be within keeping.
Right, because they wouldn't be
Well,
allowed.
you have service use, which kind
Service,
Oh, yeah,
where,
service
what
use,
page
yeah,
of the
we have-
definition?
so the services is
At
the
the
place to
beginning.
lay my yoga mat down.
well, that's where it's, service use
We
is,
got
shall,
studio in here.
it says shall include
Studio
uses such
restaurant.
as barber, hairdresser, shooter,
Artist.
hair, businesses providing similar services of a personal nature.
So that covers a lot.
So that could be a personal trainer, that could be yoga, that could be.
You know, that's,
Yeah,
but, you know, I don't know where.
Have there
the-
been any uses that you found that you had to say, no, can't do that, it's not in the zoning?
No, there's been stuff I've said no because it's not allowed in the district, but not
right.
specific.
Well,
So,
in this.
well, the one thing that's not in the zoning, and probably not wanted too much in town, I won't say that loudly, but, self-storage units.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, and there's, right, it includes
And,
things that.
you know, is that a service use, is it, you know, you're providing a service personal in
Mhm.
nature, it's for a single, or for a person to store
mhm.
their excess stuff, you know, a place for their stuff.
Is that allowed anywhere in town?
Well, that's, I have,
Well, I know that part of Brett's building is storage,
yeah.
so that's a use that's happening within that building, which is a multi-use building.
Yeah, but there's nothing says that storage units,
No, storage units as a
a
standalone.
standalone business,
Mhm.
you know, I think is it, but under service use, you know, service use again's not, to me, doesn't give you enough information to say yes or no.
Mhm.
Where would an art gallery fall?
Art gallery, I'd say retail, because they're, as long as they're selling,
Not necessarily an art gallery.
Like Matt Brown, he would be.
Yeah, but he
Well,
sells-
He sells, but like
Yeah.
just a museum.
Oh, just not selling stuff.
well, the museum for,
Hopefully it's an
Lyme.
institution.
yeah, I would say the Lyme, like the Lyme Historians Museum is an institution.
So what about adult bookstore, would that be allowed?
Retail
under-
use.
It's a retail
Yeah,
use.
Retail use, so it is allowed, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. No, I just had a bunch of people that asked me, they want.
Any bookstore,
Yeah.
retail use.
Yeah.
We're not banning anything, you can't ban any books here.
You wanna put it near
Well,
the
let's
school.
go back to the list that we've got here, and I think it's a good idea that.
Well, if you can think of a list of things that you can't see how they fit in, I think that's very helpful, because we need to.
Well, I'm
try to
naive
accommodate.
to this as well, so, I mean, you guys have been thinking about this for years.
We gotta read the definitions of these, because they're
Read the-
broader than they, yeah.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
And,
Well, it's like, you know, what I've always looked at is, you know, what types of businesses are in other towns,
mhm,
and how do they fit under
mhm,
those, you know, there's a marina in Fairleigh,
yep,
that would be retail.
yeah. It's all boat storage though too, but.
Yeah, it's boat storage, boat
Probably they-
repairs,
Probably it's more boat storage than it is retail, actually, but in terms of their cash flow.
So I guess it was part of the, when Rusty was talking about a planned development, when it requires a certain percentage of business or commercial use.
That's planned development, that's a
Yeah, the
problem
planned
here.
development, but, I mean, he was like, do you have to have business use?
right.
Yeah,
Right, I mean, that,
Yeah,
that's,
because it doesn't exactly say you have to, it says
it says it's a mix.
a mix.
Right.
I mean, can you have a mixed-use building, which is commercial on the first floor and
Well, what do we
resident?
want?
Exactly.
I mean, so that's the thing, I mean, I'd be willing to work on plan development, or do you wanna do that? I mean, I don't wanna grab.
I'm just, you know, I feel like a whale shark going through this, going, ooh, that's interesting, ooh, that's interesting.
I know, well, they're all interesting, but the question is, well, we're gonna get some, I mean, assuming we go ahead with our survey, we'll get some feedback for the plan development thing, and some feedback too for conversions, so that's good.
Yep.
I wonder,
Well,
Rich said conversions,
I said conversions.
yeah, which, that's a big thing.
Yeah. One of the other ones I just threw in there is, 516 gross floor area. The second sentence is where I'm,
Is it?
it's, the third
Oh,
page,
yeah.
the
Yeah,
fourth
yeah.
page, very bottom. And I highlighted the sentence, and my question really is, when does that get applied?
Which, you mean,
The sentence,
When is the planning board determining what the maximum gross floor area is?
it says that they shall do it, so you have to do it, but when? Under what circumstances are you going to make that determination?
Well, when
Well,
somebody
there-
comes to the project
But,
for a big building.
yeah, cause we have a chart that.
but
lists
it doesn't, right here in the zoning,
Right,
it says you shall
determine,
determine it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell you when you're going to determine it. Are you going to determine it for every single zoning permit that I issue? Do you want me to bring every new building so you can determine the floor area?
I mean, I would tend to think that it must have been written, that it might have been written as a reaction that it's the planning board that's determining what the maximum gross floor area is when projects are close to exceeding 14,000 square feet.
So if somebody wants to build a house that was going to exceed that floor area, then it has to come to the planning board.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Under what,
But,
you can't do it under site plan review.
right.
You
same
can't do it
thing,
under
no.
subdivision.
But if
Maybe
they
we
were
do
able
it
to-
before the zoning administrator
So-
issues a building permit.
if the
But under
lot is
what-
subdividable, then does that, if they can make two lots out of it, does that mean the max now is 28,000?
That'll be 14,000 for each.
Well, but if you had a parcel that could be divided into two parcels, does that give you the right to have 14,000 times two in one building? I mean, I don't think that's the intent.
Yeah, I don't either, but that's, you know, to me, this sentence does not,
I mean, what's the value being added by the part that says if the property were divided into the maximum number of lots? I mean, I don't understand
I don't either, so
where that
that's.
comes from. So this is good. I mean, what would happen,
There is similar language in the lot size averaging.
although that almost makes some sense, because it's like, well, if this property could be divided into
Yeah.
funky
And
parcels.
if it's the case that this is, for lot size averaging, just put it in there. So that, you know, this just, to me, is very unclear
Right.
as to when the planning board would be making this determination.
Except when somebody walks in and they say, this is my parcel, I want 14,000 square feet. And,
Yeah.
and you,
But going back to the zoning, Well, I guess, yeah, if you're,
Yeah, I don't think,
So you think it should be divided in two, that one would be like the rule for everything and one would be the rule for lot size averaging? Is that
if
what
that's
you're
where you
saying?
think this applies.
Well, who knows? I mean-
Right, I don't know, that's,
Okay, well, nobody
that's,
knows. So what do you think? Would that be helpful then to have that broken up into the two
well, I think if,
circumstances?
so David, I don't quite understand, so you can only have up to 14,000 square feet on a lot,
yeah,
right? I mean, that's clear.
yeah,
So obviously, if you think you could have two lots, you're not gonna get 28,000 square feet unless it's a separate lot, and then you can put 14,000 on that.
but
So,
if you look at this language,
Right,
if you could subdivide, so you have a very large lot, is it saying that if I wanna have a very large building
on a
On-
25-acre lot.
on a 25-acre lot,
Yeah,
then the planning board can, but the way that it's written, maximum storage shall be determined.
yeah, I think just
It just-
putting it in, in the case of a lot size averaging, just add that in there.
And, or, yeah, and again, I don't know, this could also be there for if you have a very large lot, or not very, large lot that, the calculation for it would be over, or you want over 14,000, you could subdivide it, then the planning board could allow you to,
two buildings,
no,
one
a
each
single
lot.
building that's over 14,000.
Mhm.
But doesn't it say you can only have up to 14,000 per lot?
Yes, but you have an exception here, you're saying that the planning board shall determine it, so that, or, again,
Yeah,
I'm questioning if, is that what the meaning is, that when if you want a very large building on a lot that you could subdivide, the planning board could, is that what this means? I don't know. It's just another possible interpretation. It just, again, to me, it's very unclear what this section,
Well, I guess the real thing is do we want buildings that are bigger than 14,000 square feet? Or, sorry, do we want gross floor areas that are bigger than 14,000 square feet? And I don't, I think we talked, Lyme is, I don't know what the gross floor area is, but we were using that for a while as a measure. I don't know what that one is now. I mean,
But
I
that
don't
doesn't,
see any issue with
how
having.
big's the school?
Yeah.
I mean, that's gotta be more than 14,000 square feet.
It's governmental use, so.
I understand, but how big is the school? I'm just trying to.
I don't know
get
how
it
Just trying to
big.
In the
visualize.
scale,
Yeah,
yeah,
I can tell, just a second.
or the Lyme Inn,
Yeah.
or the church for that matter, I mean,
Mhm,
just to,
mhm.
Earl's, or Brett's building,
What's the square root of 14,000?
yeah, I'm trying to think, Robin Nene's house is 12,000.
probably
Is it
something
really?
close to 12, with a multiple of 12.
Cause their whole cellar is living space.
3 3/4.
And the whole upstairs, so it doubles that.
Yeah.
And then they got up there.
wow.
The school, according to division, the school's, gross floor area is 37,600 square feet.
37,000, do you say?
37,600, yeah.
Square root of.
Square root's 818.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the gym alone is probably.
Yeah, and the gym alone is,
So
What
a
about
building
the-
118 by 118 is
do you know what that is?
14,000.
Yeah.
I'll just poke around just a second.
That's a pretty big building.
But we have a building footprint where it can't be bigger than 7,000 square feet,
Right, so you have a 7,000 square foot building that's 2 stories.
2 stories,
You want to add a third.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that just something to
Yep,
consider, I don't.
Okay, and then the other one above that, I think, is something that David and I were chatting about, in terms of accessory uses.
20,200.
And I guess, the recent ADU that was, that's under construction on Route 10 by,
Chris Brown's house.
Chris Brown's
Right, yeah.
house, has a state highway access, and it has two state highway access. And I was asking, how is that legal, and
Where, I'm sorry, I know one comes out on Route 10.
Both of
they
them go on
both,
Route 10.
they both come out on Route 10.
Oh, does the White House, the house, the original house? has-
Right.
Gotcha.
And so what this says is both units shall share an access to a town or private road. And I think David's interpretation is because it's a state road,
Yep.
this doesn't apply.
Because, I mean, how can you share an access to a town or private road when the access is on a state highway?
Right,
I mean, I would argue that's an omission.
I think so too.
And that we ought to change that to,
Yeah, I
To a
agree.
public
because-
road, or public or private road, I guess, is what we
Yeah.
want.
How many driveways onto a state highway can you have?
Depends on the lot and depends where you are. So if you look at Route 10 north of the school,
Yeah,
that is not limited. If you go south of the school to the Hanover
Yep.
town line, you are limited by a deed restriction, depending on your lot. So back in the 60s, when when the state took land for
Yeah.
the road, they deeded numbers of accesses to the property. Some landowners said, no, that's not good enough, give me more. If they got more, some landowners, sure, whatever. And so
so if they have deeded state highway access, how does that interact with constraining them to share a driveway?
it doesn't matter. Because when I look at it, I'm going to say the zoning says you have to share. And so it doesn't matter how many the state is willing to give you, how many access, the zoning says you have to
Takes
share.
precedent, takes precedent.
Well, the zoning will take precedence because the state access, there's no state law or regulation involved. It is just how many that the landowner negotiated when the state
Right,
put in the road.
right. But the state has to approve in any way, even if they've given permission, they still have to approve that.
Right.
yeah.
Right,
Which they did in the case of Christine Brown's house.
yeah, and obviously she must have had two acts.
Yeah, at least
And you
two.
can't change that once that's
No,
set, you
that's
can't
set.
get more.
Right. I mean, I'm assuming you could go to the state and somehow ask for more, but
Yeah.
whether they would give you more, I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess my thought is we ought to just correct that to both units share access to
Public or private
a
road.
public or
Yeah.
private road.
That's,
That will clarify it beautifully for me.
yeah,
And then the other thing is the, dealing with the gross floor area. Because I was asking, what's to prevent somebody from building a garage and living in the garage? Or adding a garage that's bigger than the detached accessory dwelling unit.
I think they could.
And if you have a detached accessory dwelling unit, then there is something that indicates, it contradicts the gross floor area residential, where is?
How did you handle Boland's, where they put in a three-car garage with an ADU behind it?
It's an attached,
It's an what, the ADU is attached to the garage?
and the garage is attached to the house.
No, it's not.
I'll need to talk to Kurt because the plan called for a,
Well, maybe it will be, but it's not at the moment.
the plan showed
But they're gonna
a connection
put a-
between,
Build a walkway, but it's
not,
not.
it built a breezeway between the two.
Yeah, but not at the moment, but yeah, okay.
So that was,
So just adding the breezeway expands how big your footprint can be.
Yes.
yes.
Right, so So that's
Well,
not an
breezeway is
ADU.
not really an attachment, honestly, it's not.
But I've always considered it an attachment
Well, it's
because
you,
you're,
I mean, yeah,
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 and
that's
the reason
fine.
for
You're
that
the
is
zoning
because I'm looking
administrator.
at building footprint. And, you know, I don't want to say that, you know, you can have, you know, two buildings,
22 page
even though
22.
they have an attachment, is, so you get twice the footprint.
Right, so the Bold's is not an ADU.
It's a garage with an ADU and attached to the house. The
Okay.
plans,
So it is an ADU.
when I approved them, plans show that, so it's an attached ADU.
It's not finished, so I'm.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Rich,
the,
I want to go back to the question you were asking about gross floor area.
of the accessory dwelling unit does not exceed 750 square feet.
Right, but the gross floor area, the definition says it does not include, attic, cellar, and garage floor areas if it's not used as a living space. I mean,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so-
That's been my interpretation, using the gross floor area residential, because an ADU is residential.
Sure, right.
And so I've always used that definition to look at what the gross floor area of the ADU.
Yeah, like the Bold's is 1 story, so he has the garage in the front,
Yep,
and then he's got the apartment in the back.
Yep.
You have the ADU in the back,
This doesn't apply because it's
attached.
attached, not a, this is a
See,
detail.
to me, it just feels wrong that a a detached accessory dwelling unit could be as big or bigger than the primary unit, the primary building on the lot.
That's why we have this here, the 750 limitation, right?
Which
No, that's what I'm saying, that,
The way I read it is that 750 is your living space in the ADU. If you want to attach a garage that
that doesn't count.
is twice as big as the ADU,
Right.
then that's,
They're two separate things, the garage is an accessory to the residence, the primary residence, and the ADU is a different thing that's accessory to the residence.
but, let's use the Bolins, for example.
Okay.
The garage, it's a 3-car garage.
Yep, they can have any size garage they want, you know, as long as it's within the building footprint limitation.
But if it's a garage for the accessory unit, I don't think it should be limitless or maybe even allowed at all.
If it's for.
Especially if it's got a separate entrance.
You mean if it's only being used by the people in the ADU?
Yeah,
Why
Yeah,
would
well-
it be though?
I mean, in their case, they're not. he's
well, I mean,
using-
I think the.
They could say it's for their kid and let the person who lives in the ADU use it. I mean, they've certainly got adequate parking without having to use that garage space, just in their driveway.
Right, I guess what I'm saying is, it seems like there should be some dimensional controls that this whole ADU should be somewhat smaller, quite a bit smaller than the primary
Okay, well, 750
dwelling
is
unit.
smaller than their house.
750 is, but the garage could make it much larger or the same size as the house.
What if they had a barn? I mean, you know, because you were talking accessory structures. And why does it
Right.
matter, honestly, if they're within the dimensional controls that we set for all lots across town? You know?
Yeah, cause.
Maybe,
'cause
Well, I mean, then we should be changing what those standards are for the massing on the lots, no matter if it's a garage or a
Right.
barn or
Right.
but is the accessory dwelling unit really accessory to the primary structure? If all of a sudden it becomes, I mean, to me, it seems like it's starting to approach the same significance as the primary structure. It's no longer a mother-in-law
So,
apartment.
Right, Rich, I'm gonna go the other
750,
way
I
and
don't-
say that,
I don't see it that way.
accessory dwelling units are, touted very heavily as a really good thing to do for improving, the availability of housing.
I don't disagree with you.
And I think 750 square feet I'll be blunt, it's stinting. It is, it is extremely limiting. If you wanted to have an independent, mother-in-law, an independent senior move in, I think 750 square feet is pretty small. 1,000, one of the questions we're asking here is 1,000, or, 1,200, or, I would even say 1,500 is not unreasonable.
That's bigger than my house, 1,500.
That's okay, Vicki.
Well, I'm just saying
Yes.
that, so would that be okay? I mean, to Rich's point.
But if
Well,
that meets the footprint,
Yeah, if it meets, clearly, it's gonna have to fit in the dimensional controls of the lot.
Mhm.
But
Right.
I think if that's what we need to do to make housing available, then I would say I'd be less worried about the accessory dwelling unit becoming a significant portion of the garage, the building where the garage is. I think let's focus on getting, housing for people. That's my thought. So,
We have a question, a comment from John, I
I'm
think.
from the public. And David, you might know better, but I think that the state passed a more generous ADU law this year. I'm not sure whether the governor signed it yet.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see how this
Yeah,
stuff all shakes out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
a
could
lot
be,
of stuff
It's
was.
in there.
But I'm almost positive it was bigger than 750.
Right.
and it originally was
Right.
written to allow two.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, on each lot, yeah.
Yeah.
So how does the Lopez's ADU stack up, that independent
yeah, that,
multi-story building?
that's,
Where's that?
On Route 10,
just across from
just
the,
near
Lyme Clinic.
Washburn Hill?
Fox Antiques building.
Oh, that green building?
No, it's a white cape.
Yeah, but the
Across-
building they built, you mean? The
Yeah, it's got
building.
green.
It's
Well, they
an
moved
old
the
white
barn
gate.
that was there, and they're
And
putting an
then
ADU that's in the 750 square feet within that barn, and they're keeping it down. But if they wanted to go larger, my opinion would be that we just switch it over to a conversion, which doesn't limit, it's an existing building, and just let them convert it to whatever size they need.
Well, it's not an existing building, they tore it down.
They moved it,
They tore it down.
it was existing footprint.
They tore it down. And they moved.
Well,
the
that's
footprint.
something that needs to be in the ordinance, that, again, my opinion is, if you are going to move an existing building, whether you're tearing it down and rebuilding it, as long as the footprint, and you're not increasing any violation.
Yeah.
Well, if the state changes the minimum or the max minimum for the ADU, then we need to change our regulation to conform.
Right.
But let's just wait on that,
Yeah.
so let's leave that one, and.
Okay.
Because that may, variety of opinion, that may like answer or
Right,
rise for the
answer.
solution.
So David, another question, septic system, like for the ADU for Matt Brown's sister?
Yep.
Are they using the septic system for the house?
They're putting in a new septic system for both,
Or both, okay,
so that they will share,
right,
to meet the requirements of the zoning.
right,
So based on the number of bedrooms.
yeah. But Rich, I also was gonna say, like, to get back to your question about with the folds, I think they could have built an attached ADU, separate, and then Kurt could have built an 8-car garage, separate, in other words, if it didn't, if he met the coverage.
Right.
So what's the difference, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that the Chris Brown one is probably a unique situation, because if we change this to being served by the same driveway, then I think it becomes, it's no longer looks like two lots or two houses on the same lot, two independent dwelling units.
I'm still, again, I'm not sure, my personal opinion, I should say, on the shared driveway, is that needs to be looked at as in an individual basis, because in that case, the driveway enters to to the south of Christine Brown's house. And so either you would need to redo the entire driveway, there's not enough space to bring it in front of the house. So you'd have to bring it around back, and now you're, well, it's not considered lot coverage, but you're putting in an impervious
Yeah,
surface.
it's a lot of area.
Yeah,
It's
you're
a
covering a
lot
huge
of
amount of
drive,
area
yeah.
that you would not need to having a separate access.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, you know, I think, putting, you know, even the change you're gonna make to, you know, on a private or a public road, there needs to be some way of reviewing that
Exception,
where
you're gonna,
if it makes more sense to have two, because the single one would, you know, like I said, in this case, it would take up so much more space on the lot.
Right.
Mhm.
But they went to the ZBA, right, for that?
You know, they had to for some other reasons, there's
So
some,
you might wanna wait till you see the state's ADU thing, if it
Right.
gets signed, because I think I'm pretty sure it addressed issues of driveways and
No.
more liberal than what exists now.
Okay.
anyway, that's my, you know, my personal opinion, just that it's,
Okay.
they're making it an absolute like that, they're, and I say, the Browns case is one of those where you could be creating more of a problem than solving.
Right.
Yeah,
So they didn't have to go to the ZBA because of the driveway, because it was on a state road, so
Right,
it didn't.
they got the curb cut for the state.
So we had nothing, zoning didn't have to do with that.
Right.
Okay.
so,
Still, I don't know.
Well, again, both units share access to a town or private road, there's no way you can,
Right.
enforce, there's,
So did the zoning board say that that was okay then?
they didn't address it.
They didn't have to because the zoning doesn't address it.
Well, but this doesn't meet all of the criteria. I mean, that detached accessory dwelling unit doesn't meet these criteria.
Which criteria?
Both units share an access to a town or private road. It doesn't meet that. I mean, clearly.
So should it
so-
have been prohibited? Because they don't have access to
All I'm saying is it doesn't meet that, and so did they give them a variance?
No, I looked at that and said that was, it's on a state road, and so that criteria doesn't apply to them.
You could do it, you could look at it both ways, I know what you're saying.
You know, and again, I,
Yeah. No,
I have no issues with the board clarifying that, I'm always happy to have things clarified and,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, no,
But-
so, yeah. Well,
Right,
you know,
but there again, in our zoning, if it isn't allowed,
it's not allowed.
Then
It
it's
should-
not
yeah,
allowed,
it
so
doesn't meet
actually-
that, so they could have gotten a variance,
Yeah.
in my
a
view.
variance or a special.
No.
No, it'd have to be a variance.
Is it, they're not able to meet this standard?
So, and everybody, all their neighbors could.
Well, no, I mean, actually, it pretty much prohibits accessory dwelling units
on a state road.
on state roads, which
Yep.
doesn't
Yep.
seem like the right
Thing.
thing.
Right.
Right, so we should be
Right.
changing the words to say public road.
Yeah.
Right, well, which we are, and then the question is would they necessarily need to share? You know, that's the other element
Well,
of that,
that's,
yeah.
right.
subject to site review, perhaps?
We don't wanna get involved, so, I mean,
No, I mean, I
no,
think,
it's just, you know,
Well, if we
What
just,
about, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, if we just change it to public or private, and then it says both units sharing access, so they would have to.
I know, but
They would have to
I'm
share.
questioning whether or not the shared access is an appropriate thing to keep in there,
For a state,
for any situation,
oh, okay.
so,
Any such-
yeah.
oh, I see.
I mean, yeah,
And I see your point, that you're trying to, you know, keep everything compact and,
Yeah.
you know, a single access going in.
Yeah, yeah,
Where if it worked out, let's say they put the ADU to the south of Christine's house in the field.
we might be even less happy.
Well, you might be less happy, but you got your shared access.
yep.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I think that part of this why it was written this way was to, in fact, make them interdependent.
Yep.
And alleviate or minimize the possibility of there being then a request for subdivision, where you'd have, you know, if you bind them in all these ways, that
Well,
they'd be less likely.
there
to
is an
subdivide.
easement that gets put on property that's saying you won't subdivide the accessory dwelling unit, so that takes care of the subdivision.
Right, but I think this further entangles, I think that was the
It,
intent.
it makes it less scattered.
Absolutely.
Yep.
How about H, because that seems hard to enforce long-term.
I think age is really critical, otherwise you get to short-term rentals and we don't
No, I
have-
know, but, you know,
Well, I mean, unless you,
in 5 years,
unless you can ensure that those are not gonna be both short-term rentals, rented out for 5 weekends, football weekends, and vacant the rest of the time, that's when you get investment in
oh,
communities and
yes, but I'm
empty
saying,
houses.
what happens in 5 years? If, you know, something happens and the owner no longer occupies the main house.
Well, somebody who would, well, I don't know who
Somebody
the owner's
rats
gonna
on
be,
it.
I mean, yes. Yeah, I mean,
I'm just wondering
You
what,
mean they sell it or somebody else
Well,
stays there?
one of them
So-
passes away and the other one moves, and then they decide to rent the main house and they still have the ADU.
Right.
I mean, what's the
One
process?
of the other-
They can do it.
Well, it's also a nightmare to try to enforce it, because I have no idea
Who owns and,
you know,
I mean,
who's
I-
living in the,
Right, no, I'm just saying it's tricky because it's hard to enforce.
and
you
It's-
need to, we have a small town, so.
Yeah, so, another, thing that was brought up, there was an ADU workshop, a long time ago at the Kilton Library, and one of the things that the speaker pointed out is that the owner occupied requirement makes it difficult to finance it, because banks are chary of lending, because if the bank owns it, the ordinance says they have to occupy it. And so if the owner defaults, the bank winds up with it. The
Until they
bank-
can sell it.
And so,
Bank's not gonna-
that's,
Yeah, they would
that's
sell
another
it.
hurdle. And, you know, do we want to be placing additional hurdles?
Well, I really don't wanna open our town up to short-term rental investment, and that's, and where we have a college, I mean, this is like, it's neighborhood busted in many college
Oh,
communities.
sure, I'm
So-
really curious how many Airbnb, the VRBOs we have in town already.
Well, we have them, but I don't believe that, I mean, we could all talk about it in our neighborhoods and say, oh, that's not, the owners don't live there, and it's
Right.
always, you know,
Right.
revolving door of transient guests,
Right.
or not. I mean, across the street from me, you know, the owners are only there during the summer and they rent it the rest of the year. And I consider that very stable, because there's just one tenant group there through the school year, and then the owners come back. But, you know, that's, so I'm not having a problem with that, but I would have a problem if every house on my street was
Oh, yeah,
not, there weren't owners, and each one of them was.
I generally disapprove of the whole
There,
thing, but
yeah.
I'm just like,
But this, I mean, the owner occupancy is really the only way you can put you know, keep earning
no, I'm,
your rent housing.
I see at initiation, it makes complete good sense. It's
Thanks for
just-
coming and
Yeah.
joining our
Well,
fun.
It was
Thanks.
traumatic to be back here, but, you're doing a great job.
Thanks for coming.
Go home and have a drink.
I see I completely agree with the point
Yeah.
at construction.
Yeah.
It's just like, what do you do later, is
Right.
what I was
Right,
concerned about.
well, you know, it's the neighbors are gonna rat on the neighbors and you can complain to David, so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's how enforcement happens in our community.
But what would David do?
I would have to send a letter to the owner saying you're in violation of the zoning, and you
Or
would,
the tenant would lose their lease, can't be used for that,
yeah,
that's,
you could rent out one
it's
or the other,
very much a
and
shame.
not both.
Right, very much a shame.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like in Hanover, there's like, you know, faculty goes on, you know, sabbatical. They wanna, you know, stuff, and so, I don't know if there could be some sort of a, short-term absences, a year could be negotiated with the zoning, documented and, it, so, I don't know if we wanted to do something like that.
Well, it's 9 o'clock. I think I'd like to just summarize where we are, because I think we have, we've assigned tasks for people, and I wanna make sure that we understand that we have tasks, and which tasks
What have
we
we
have.
signed up for?
What are we
Right.
signed up
So,
for?
did you write down who signed up for what? Or should we just say it again?
Well, let's go down through these. So the first one, the steep slopes, I think David is
David,
Yeah,
gonna be doing that, as well as the shoreline conservation district. Tim is gonna work on the ag soils.
Yeah.
Plan development, was that you, Vicki?
Yeah, I'll take that, cause it's kind of an orphan.
I was gonna do conversions.
Yeah.
Special exceptions, I think we
Punt,
are gonna punt on that.
but I think it's a
with
good
the-
one to take a look at, just to clear up 11.
If
Yeah.
somebody could rewrite 11 to make it more straightforward.
Accessory uses, it sounds like we've already made the change.
Well, for the roads, and then we'll just see what the
See what the
752
state
says.
And we,
says.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, and then if the state doesn't pass, then we can argue about that number.
Yeah.
It's just a single number,
yeah.
And I think that was gonna be logic.
yes.
Which one was that?
It's
So
not on.
lodging,
Not on-
transient,
Oh, yeah, yeah. That transient lodging.
And then we also had the 511 D7.
D7, which is the
lot size averaging.
lot size averaging, of the adding of, there is no procedure that the board has, so, I've only seen it 3 times since I've been here, so we're, 16, almost 17 years. But I don't have anything I can tell somebody who would like to do that, what they need to provide the planning board. And I don't know where the board could put that, but just something so I can say, hey, the board's going to wanna see this, and this. Instead of having them come to the board saying, right now I just say, write a letter of intent and what you wanna do. And, you need to prove that you can subdivide to get there. And maybe that is enough, I don't know.
Well, maybe, because if they did all that and then came to us, then at that point, we would say what we need, right?
Right, but it would be nice to be able to say up front that the board, again, when you look at a subdivision application, a site plan review application, all the application requirements are laid out and they can get those done, and it just saves them time, it saves the board
Well,
time.
it makes it clearer whether it's likely to pass or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also, to me, is a more fair way of doing it because you're requiring the same information from every applicant. And now, there's always the catch-all that the board can say, well, we want some more information because of this specific.
Right.
But it's still, it gives them at least a clear idea of what they need to provide up front, and less likely of a surprise saying, oh, we want X, Y, and Z now.
Yeah.
Did I hear you say, David, that there's only been one application under lot size averaging?
For the additional house, 3. 3, the 2 that would have been done, and a third,
I'm aware of one that failed.
There was a lot of averaging on Franklin Hill.
but it was the additional house under D7.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's 2 that I know of, and then there's a third that I've been talking with somebody.
That's the one up on
So-
Whipple Hill.
So it has been used?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's one, if you go out, what's the road Patty used to live on?
Derby?
Yeah, it's, used to be the Waltons, and then it was sold, they have one, not Franklin Hill, Acorn Hill, top Acorn Hill, the big farm.
Large
Yeah, Lucky Star,
Yeah, what was,
George
George
Hanna.
George Hano's
Hano.
old place,
Yeah,
there, and then like I said, there's a third.
All right.
So,
because he built another house up there, right?
Yes, I guess, and that's typically what the,
Lot size average.
what that has been done for, is somebody wants a guest house.
So would they use that for an ADU? What's a guest house?
A guest house is
Another
a
house.
house that,
Full residence that's not an ADU?
yeah,
Right.
right,
But they can't rent that?
no, there's no restriction.
What do you mean there's no restriction?
These, you can, the board can approve as many houses as they can subdivide. So let's say you can subdivide a lot into two, then you can approve a second house.
and they could both be rented.
They can both be rented, they
Owner
can
doesn't
both, there's
live in
no,
one.
Right, and in his case, he had 4 acres around the house that was not in conservation easement, so that's why he could do it there.
but the easement had nothing to do with,
Right,
Because,
yeah,
Hebe, do you want to?
Did you want me to go after table 4.1?
Sure.
Sure, think about uses.
Well, if I think of all the uses and then you can tell me where they fall, I think.
Yeah,
that
I
would-
have
yeah,
a
that's
list
cool.
of things that people might do, funeral home, barber shop.
Come on, that's personal service.
I mean, if you check in
Maybe,
like the
I mean,
state
yes, it could-
wastewater
Service.
regulations, they have a bunch of uses there, as well as probably other towns' zoning ordinances, but typically the state has a number of uses when they're figuring out the wastewater.
yeah, they have a huge list of uses for
And I
wastewater.
don't know whether
Okay,
that applies.
campground is something we don't have, like recreation and, indoor
Yeah.
recreation and campground.
Though there's a recreational use, which,
Yes, that's outside though.
yeah,
So we can't have an inside squash court or.
right, but I'm saying, the campground, that's questionable.
Could you put a Planet Fitness in?
No,
No,
Why?
unless you call it a personal service, I guess,
Exactly.
but I,
that one I would have trouble calling it a personal service.
But you see that there's a continuum of gym
Right,
sizes.
right.
Yeah.
it's a commercial business.
I mean, there
But
are
it's-
two gyms in Fairleigh,
Yes.
right in the same building,
Right,
but they're tiny little things.
Yep.
And,
yeah,
is that
no, we had
objectionable?
a hard time in figuring out, like, say you had a my court type of thing, tennis court, big
Yeah.
tennis court building. That would be big, it might be more than 14,000 square feet, or, and,
All right,
So-
I'll just make a list and we can just,
yeah.
and figure out if anything falls
How about
outside.
inside water?
So next meeting, we're gonna be talking about the draft housing questions. I just remembered, I'm probably not gonna be coming. Are there any other board members that are absent?
Do you wanna hand out
It's
the?
gonna be-
Yeah, why don't you hand that out
Okay.
now?
So those are from Hebe. Now there's another, I'm gonna hand another set of, alternate question 3 from Nat that he had sent.
Oh,
So,
This is mine,
I think
this is mine, yours.
I used this is there.
Wait,
no, this one he sent, after you sent yours.
I don't have any 3, there's only, starts at 4.
Question 3 just didn't seem right to me, so I rewrote it.
Actually,
There's-
David, I
I'm
only
missing a-
got pages.
Missing a page.
Yeah, cause I just printed them out and,
I think you maybe
Missed
did,
a page.
Every-
Didn't do front to
one-sided
back.
or something.
oh, it's two-sided and it,
Yeah.
so it only paid.
Why don't you just send that to us and?
I think you sent
I
it
did
to
send
us.
it.
You did
Yeah.
send it.
Oh, you sent it to us,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
I just meant to print it out, I'm sorry, I didn't
And
realize
that
it was,
includes Nat's
Oh, that's-
new
no,
three?
it does not include Nat's.
Okay, why don't you just send it to us, we don't need these.
Yeah, just send that.
Do we need alternate question 3, or?
Can you send that?
I'll just send it to you.
I just
Okay.
thought it'd be easier if you had it in front of you.
Yeah,
We're not looking at it right now.
Right.
okay. So this is reset.
So I just streamlined a little bit what Vicky had done, modest edits and just,
I saw your modest edits, so I think we should use instead of auxiliary, we should use accessory, because that's what we have in our zoning.
Sure,
ordinance.
no, yeah.
And then the other one is, I think that bringing in the number of students that 100 units might generate is just controversial.
Yeah,
and that we should put
Well, that's
that
why
in there.
I gave a citation
I
for where it
know,
was coming from, but
you know what?
I just wanted to give perspective, because people don't
That's a
understand.
national standard, I would like, I mean, I think it'd be very interesting, based on the number of occupied housing units we have here, how many kids are in the school, in Lyme? We
Right.
have, you know, or how many
Oh, we
houses?
can do that, there, I mean, there's 750
Right,
residents and
well-
300 students.
Well, let's say, how many of those houses have kids, that would be like, I think, a better, if we're gonna put in a metric, let's put in Lyme's metric, how many households in Lyme have a kid?
Sort of, but I need to talk to Rich and Rich before they go, so.
How would you do that?
Well, we need to get a student roster and say, we don't really want student roster, what we want is addresses. And, you know, obviously, you know, my old house has got 3 kids, so that's just one house, and that's a child occupied house, but I'd rather have that than a national one, because I don't think that, I mean, people
Well,
are.
Lyme is atypical, we have to remember that,
Well,
Lyme
okay,
is
but
totally
okay,
atypical.
okay, but.
But if you just took 750 and divided it by, or 800 and divided it by 300 students, you'd come up with like, you know, what, .4?
Well-
1.4 of a student per house,
But that's a lot different than
but I mean,
30
Yeah, and-
or,
Yeah, and the
Well,
whole thing
it's
about
different than people
the
moving
new
in.
versus old, what about the Maglebys, okay?
the what?
The Maglebys, there are people that can easily, they're building a new house for their 3 children. This is the house up the road from me.
Oh, okay.
On Washburn Hill.
Okay.
And they, of course, came into Lyme,
Mhm.
bought a big place, now they're renting a place, and they've built one. So I don't think that, you know.
I just feel like we need to ground,
Well, if we
ground it in something, and I'm not particularly wedded to, I was just trying to
Yeah.
do something
No, I
reasonable.
understand, but I would prefer, like, if we have a line number, put that in, otherwise, I don't wanna create controversy in our survey.
I agree.
No, I
That
don't
was the
wanna
one
make
thing
the-
I noted.
And the other question I had, Evie,
Do
was.
you want to continue this next week?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do
Yeah.
that.
No, not next
Well, anyway, I
week.
just had
Or
a
next
quick
meeting,
question.
next time, yes.
Don't we need to say something in there about the
Where?
surveys that we'll receive in the mail? Cause you've
Are we-
got it here.
are we gonna mail it?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
We are, okay,
cause you have a paper version and I've got one, but
I was
Amazing.
unclear that we were decided to mail it out.
Well, we don't know
Yeah.
that we have money to mail it out.
Exactly, that's why I was.
But I think we decided we had to if we were gonna get an accurate survey, you know, to get enough people.
Right,
We,
but-
we can add that in or not add that in.
Sure.
Once
No, I
we
understand.
decide.
Yeah. No, but I think all I have
All three
content.
groups.
Oh, the other thing is, what if I am 10 years old, do I say 5 to 10, or do I say 10 to 20? Just like the, how you.
Or you like the endpoints on your.
The
Yeah,
notice of
yeah.
decision for the
So-
condominium that I
Yeah.
sent you. and
So
said
that was the only
was
other
good,
thing
and
that
you
I.
Yeah.
signed